Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the January 25th meeting of the City of Clovis Planning Commission. Members of the public are encouraged to participate in the meeting by accessing the webcast on the city's website, providing written comment at the same website, participating by phone, or attending the Planning Commission meeting. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Commissioner Hebert will be leading us in the flag salute. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Commission Secretary, if you could call the roll.
Yes, Commissioner Bedstead?
Here.
Commissioner Hatcher?
Here.
Commissioner Hebert?
Here.
Commissioner Hinkle?
Here.
And Chair Antuna?
Here. I'd like to open a motion to approve the minutes for the December 14, 2023 Planning Commission meeting.
So move. Second.
Okay, I have a motion by Commissioner Hinkle and a second by Commissioner Bedstead to approve the December 14th, 2023 minutes. Commissioner Hinkle?
Yes.
Commissioner Bedstead?
Yes.
Chair Antuna?
Yes.
Commissioner Hatcher?
Yes.
Commissioner Hebert?
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0 unanimous, approving the minutes.
Commission Secretary, do we have any comments?
No, we don't.
Are there any comments from the Planning Commission members? Okay, seeing none, the Planning Commission will now take business from the floor. This is an opportunity for the members of the public to address the Planning Commission on any matter within the Planning Commission jurisdiction that is not listed on the agenda. If you would like to speak, please step up to the mic. State your name and address for the record. In order for everyone to be heard, please limit your time to 5 minutes. And if anyone wishes to be placed on the agenda for a specific topic, you should contact the Planning Division and submit correspondence at least 10 days prior to the desired date. Do you have any comments? Do we have anyone online?
No online comments.
Yes, other than what is on the agenda. I'm sorry for not clarifying that. Do we have anyone who wants to speak on anything that is not on the agenda? Okay. Seeing none, now we're going to open for the public hearing. Consider items associated with approximately 1.62 acres of land located on the northwest corner of Ashland and DeWolf Avenues. And forgive me if I mispronounce your name. Harpit Singh Sumal, owner, applicant, Kelsey George of Precision Civil Engineering, representative. 1, consider adoption of Resolution 24, a resolution to recommend the City Council adopt and environmental findings of mitigated negative declaration for general planning amendment 2023-002 and rezone 2023-002. B, consider Resolution 24-G, a general plan amendment to 2023-002, a resolution to recommend the City Council approve an amendment to the general plan to redesignate the subject property from a low-density residential 2.1 to 4.0 dwelling units per acre and open space designation to the high-density residential 15.1 to 30.0 dwelling units per acre designation. C, consider approval of Resolution 24, R2023-002, a resolution to recommend the City Council approve a rezone of the subject property from an RA, single-family residential, very low-density zone district to a R3, multiple high-density zone district. Staff Member Mackenzie Perez, presenting.
Good evening, Chair Antuna, Commissioners. Mackenzie Perez with the Planning and Development Services Department. This evening, you'll be considering General Plan Amendment 2023-002 and Rezone 2023-002. The subject property is located at 3182 DeWolf Avenue on the northwest corner of Ashland and DeWolf Avenues. It's approximately 1.6 acres, currently developed with a single-family residence. It's surrounded by residential to the north, west, and south, and a school to the east. The proposed general plan amendment and rezone would initiate the development of a 26-unit multifamily development. The general plan amendment is proposing to change the land use from low-density residential and open space to high-density residential. Staff is recommending the elimination of the open space designation so that there is one consistent designation on the property. That open space is for a trail, and that trail will remain a condition of the project. The rezone is proposing to change the designation from RA, single-family residential, very low density, to the R3 designation, which is multifamily high density. The project applicant will be required to comply with the multifamily development standards of the R3 zone district. As I mentioned, the general plan amendment and rezone would initiate the development of a 26-unit multifamily development. As shown on the screen, you have two access points, one off of Ashland and one off DeWolf. There are 60 parking spaces proposed, 26 covered and 34 uncovered. There will be 3 residential buildings on site, 2 10-unit buildings and 1 6-unit building. The residential building along the west side is about 60 feet, and it's about 70 feet to the northern property line. There will be open space area as well as a play structure and a neighborhood gateway, as well as a 30-foot paseo on the southern portion of the property. Here you kind of have an aerial photograph of the subject property with the existing development, as well as what the proposed development will look like within the development. Here's just a conceptual building elevation. The project is proposing to be 2 stories with a maximum height of about 26 feet. Here's additional renderings of the building elevation, one from the main entrance perspective, as well as one from the courtyard within the development. The developer did host a neighborhood meeting in September of 2022. Several members of the public were in attendance and did express concerns. Those included the change of use. The developer did explore multiple options of development for the site, including single-family and commercial development. However, due to the size and the location and the limits of the development standards, those projects were not feasible, and I'll let the applicant go into that a little bit further. Another concern was traffic, specifically traffic during the school hours. The site is on an intersection of 2 major streets, so the volume of traffic could be accommodated by both streets. A traffic analysis for trip generation and VMT were prepared, and both determined that no further analysis would be required. Noise and lighting were also a concern. The applicant will be required to comply with the noise and lighting standards outlined in our development code. We also have a lighting mitigation measure that's included as part of the project. There was another concern regarding water and sewer usage. A water and wastewater analysis were also prepared and determined that our existing facilities could accommodate the land use change. The applicant will be required to pay impact fees associated with the development. Staff also mailed a notice to this public hearing on December 29th to property owners within 800 feet. Since then, staff has not received any calls or letters. Findings are required for a general plan amendment and rezone. Staff has determined that the amendment is consistent with the goals and policies of the general plan, and that the amendment and rezone would not be detrimental to the public interest or general welfare of the city. The parcel is suitable for the proposed project. It would develop unused property that has size and location limitations. It would also provide an alternative housing type in the area and contribute to the city's housing stock. We did do a mitigating negative declaration that included several technical studies, and the analysis determined that impacts would be less than significant with mitigation. Mitigation measures included things like lighting compliance with our development code, dust control measures, as well as emission measures for construction equipment, and also some requirements for biological or cultural resources if those were discovered prior to or during construction. Staff recommends that the Planning Commission consider adoption of a resolution to recommend that the City Council adopt the environmental finding of a mitigated negative declaration, that the Planning Commission consider approval of a resolution to recommend that the City Council approve an amendment to the general plan to redesignate the subject property from low-density residential and open space to high-density residential. And staff recommends that the Planning Commission consider approval of a resolution to recommend the City Council approve the request to change the zoning from RA to R3. That concludes my presentation. I'm here to answer any questions, and the applicant will be giving a short presentation after too.
Does the commission have any clarifying questions for staff? Okay, seeing none, then we'd like to invite the applicant, if he's present. If you can just step up to the podium and if you can please state your name and your address. Thank you. Sure. Good evening, everybody. My name is Kelsey George. Address is 1234 O Street, Fresno, California. I'm with Precision Civil Engineering. Also present this evening are the project applicant and ownership team, Harpreet Sumal and Jagdeep Singh, who will also be available to answer any questions. So this slide is really just to orient us. I know staff's presentation gave the same information, but to reiterate, we are discussing the 1.62 acre parcel on the northwest corner of Ashland and DeWolf Avenue. Next, I want to talk a little bit about the layout and the description. Although no physical development is being proposed at this time, the land use changes that have been submitted and are on the agenda this evening would facilitate multifamily development. Included in the staff report and on the screen is just a conceptual of what it would look like. I know the staff report noted that the proposed density could accommodate up to 48 units on this site, but I just want to make it clear that here is showing 26 units, and we're essentially maxed out right now because we are required to provide a certain number of parking, open space. We do have the gateway, the neighborhood gateway requirement, and the 30-foot paseo on both street frontages. This next slide illustrates a conceptual lotting pattern. I wanted to include it to kind of show how the site would integrate into the neighborhood and kind of serve as a transitional development from future and existing single-family residential to the north and the west, and the school site to the east. This shows how the proposed trail would connect to the neighborhood and lead out to the intersection and the neighborhood gateway. I think there was mention of it in the staff report, but that neighborhood gateway would mimic what's on both street corners on the south side of Ashland. Next, I wanted to touch on a couple of goals from the city's housing element. I don't think that the housing element has been certified by the state yet, but the draft housing element has some goals that I think the city is going to commit to once certified. So there's a lot of text on this slide, and I'm not going to read it all word for word, but I want to just highlight housing element goal H1 to accelerate housing production, which says to provide an ample supply of housing to meet the existing and projected housing needs for households of all income levels. And then there's a variety of housing element policies that are intended to implement this goal,
including diversifying housing in single-family neighborhoods, providing a variety of housing types, and removing barriers to housing production. One thing I do want to address are a few of the development constraints on this property and point out, as staff had noted, that multifamily was not the first concept that we came up with. The conceptual plan that we have and that we're showing is a result of a series of conversations and architects and site plans. I think sometimes it's a common myth that we want to develop multifamily just to maximize profits and max out the site, and that's really not the case here. We did look at commercial and we did look at single family, and they just don't really pencil out with some of the constraints. So first we have the required public improvements. So as noted, there would be a 30-foot wide paseo along both street frontages, so that's Ashland and DeWolf. It would be required to be dedicated and constructed by the project applicant. In addition, there's a 6,280 square foot neighborhood gateway also required to be dedicated and constructed. So the cost of some of these development improvements is not really proportionate to the development for a single family residential to pencil out. There's also limited access to the site. City standard requires access points or drive approaches. I put 50 to 100 feet. I'm not sure exactly what it is, and Sean can clarify. But they need to be a certain distance away from intersections, and the creation of 6 lots would add 6 drive approaches, which would not be feasible or safe for vehicular traffic, and that 6-lot figure came from the number of lots that would currently be permitted on this site. There's also lot configuration constraints. The subject property currently is approximately 280 feet by 250 feet. Again, looking at the 6 single-family lots, the RA zone district, which it's currently zoned, requires 110 by 130 feet lot standards, which we couldn't possibly multiply by 6, and we wouldn't even be able to do the density minimum with these lot standards. So overall, in bold at the bottom, is that commercial and single-family development was considered and was determined ultimately not feasible with existing constraints. Here's one of the original iterations of the site, which shows commercial use for a neighborhood market, but this idea really didn't get too far into the review or anything. I really just wanted to illustrate that we did explore different options. Next, we'll talk about the environmental review. So an initial study was completed for the project, and it resulted in a mitigated negative declaration. The initial study looked at 19 different impact areas, including aesthetics, land use, planning, transportation, and public services. In order to inform the initial study, the applicant contracted with LSA to prepare 5 different technical studies. These studies included air quality and greenhouse gas, historical resources, archaeological resources, trip generation and vehicle miles traveled analysis, and bioresources assessment. So overall, it was determined that the project would have a less than significant impact with mitigation incorporated. So what that means, for those not familiar, is that the size and the scope and the intensity of the project was not large enough to trigger environmental impacts beyond what could be mitigated through mitigation measures or conditions of approval. So next we'll talk about public outreach. So pursuant to Chapter 9.04 of the Clovis Municipal Code, there are 2 neighborhood meetings that are required. One has to occur before Planning Commission, and the other one has to occur between Planning Commission and City Council. So as staff noted, we did have a neighborhood meeting a while ago before Planning Commission. Several neighbors did show up, and they had general concerns with multifamily being built on that site on the basis that it just wasn't their understanding when they purchased their homes that that would be developed with multifamily. There's also traffic, noise, light, and glare impacts. The initial study looked at all 3 of those things and determined that there was a less than significant impact from an environmental standpoint. The city also has codified performance standards in its municipal code that address all of those things that would be required to be complied with at the time of physical development. And in addition to that, the city has adopted multifamily residential design standards that also address these issues. Again, as staff already mentioned, there were concerns with water usage, and a water supply analysis was completed, and it was determined that when impact fees are paid, that the site would have adequate water supply. So we will be required to hold a second neighborhood meeting and mail letters to all property owners within the 800-foot radius, and then go to City Council for the final decision. So, and once the land use has been addressed, then the applicant can formally submit for site plan review. So these are just conceptuals. I do want to point out these were, this was another sticking point at the neighborhood meeting. The neighbors generally did not like the look of these apartments, and the applicant and the ownership team is completely okay with changing it and revising it to something else. These were just conceptuals to show how it would look like on the ground level with the neighborhood gateway and with the playground that will be required per city standard. But at the time of site plan review, staff will look at the architectural design, open space and landscaping, setbacks, screening and buffering, height, and access to city services. So again, I know that seeing the number 30 dwelling units per acre is alarming for people, but there are site restrictions that literally make it impossible to build at that density. And that concludes my presentation. I'm available for any questions as well.
Are there any clarifying questions from the commission for the applicant?
I just want to ask, so you're committing to a not to exceed 26 units, irrespective of what you end up doing in site plan review?
I mean, it's definitely something we can talk about. We're maxed out right now with the current design at 26, and that puts us at 16.2 dwelling units per acre in a zone district that allows 15 to 30. I mean, if we could squeeze a couple more, I'm sure we would try, but we're not going to get anywhere near 48. There's 2 to 3 parking stalls required per unit, so every unit we add, we have to add 2 to 3 parking stalls. And there's, I mean, we have height limitations. We can't go 6 stories high or anything like that.
Okay. Well, we'll discuss some of that, but thank you.
Yeah, I have a question. You had mentioned, I guess, the aesthetics or how the project looked. I think that was one of the things that jumped out at me, so I was glad to hear you say that. But how does that process work to actually change the look and feel of the property?
So all of the conceptuals that were shown tonight are not finalized and have not been formally submitted to the city for review. The city does have adopted multifamily design guidelines that look at things like architectural design style. We're required to submit a color and materials board for staff's review. So they'll have control on all functions of that. I don't know if that answered your question.
No, I'm just trying to get a feel for what the process is. Does it come back to the city, or who makes those determinations? If I say, I'm sitting here as a commissioner and say, it's kind of ugly to me. So how does that,
I can answer that a little bit. So when it gets submitted to staff, we will look at our design guidelines to see if they comply. We can provide some recommendations on the development of it. However, we do have multifamily design guidelines that state if you meet 2 of these requirements or 3 of these requirements, you are complying with that requirement. So we can note that, and we can take note of what would be appropriate or what the commission would like to see, and work with the applicant on that design. But ultimately, if they comply with the multifamily development design standards, as long as they're in compliance, we wouldn't be able to essentially have the discretion.
I think just a comment, what I think what we wrestle with sometimes as a commission is we're approving what's in front of us, and there's still subsequent actions that have to be taken. In prior instances, you know, we're trusting that the city is working and putting the right level of scrutiny and thoughtfulness into whether that's color scheme or adherence to what the commission's approving. I think part of what I was asking for your commitment on is, would you be fine with the condition of approval that said not to exceed 26 units?
Yeah, and when we open it up for public comment and I sit back down, I'll talk to the property owner and be able to advise on that answer better.
Thank you.
Do we have any more questions for the applicant? Okay, great. Thank you very much. Now we're going to ask if there is anyone in support of this item to step up to the podium.
Chair, before you open to opposition, I would just like to clarify a point regarding the questions that have been asked to this point. The question in front of the commission at this point and under your purview is making a recommendation on the general plan amendment and rezone. And again, those are the policy questions in front of you as to density. Like any other multifamily project, the actual site plan approvals are subject only to staff's review according to objective standards. So based on city standards and city ordinance, there's not generally a situation where the commission would have purview over multifamily design, and that would be the case here. So yes, you do hand off that question as just the council to staff to implement city policy. And we don't look at conditioning general plan amendments and rezonings because the conditions can't be revoked, or the general plan and rezoning can't be revoked for lack of compliance. That's not how those policy questions work. So really what we're looking at is the change that's proposed acceptable to this point on its own, and then the actual development of the property is a separate question that's handled under the standards in the development code.
Thank you very much, Dave, for the clarification. Yes? Yes, go ahead.
So my apologies for not committing to answering the question earlier. I don't want to overpromise outside of my purview, but I spoke to the owners and they did say that they would commit to a 27 unit max just because if there's an on-site manager requirement per state law, but again, they would still have to provide the parking and the additional open space. So 26 likely, 27 committed cap.
Thank you.
Can I just add one more clarification, just related to kind of the unit count? Is we did have technical studies that were prepared that analyzed the 26-unit project. So if there are changes to that, we would also have to revise and update potentially the environmental assessment.
Thank you. Okay. So I'll go again. Do we have anyone in the public wanting to speak for this project? Please step up to the podium and state your name. Go ahead. Either way, you can step up and state your name and address for the record.
There we go. Chuck Eaton, 8125 East Shields. And my question, and maybe it's just not an understanding of what I'm seeing, but we're talking about a paseo, a 30-foot paseo, and then I've heard some mentions of gates tying into a paseo, and what is occurring along Ashland, we have developments down there at Locan that have streetscapes and sidewalks for the kids to take to the Reagan Center. So that extends down there about halfway between Locan and DeWolf as we head to the east here. Are we doing something different as far as that future plan to tie into that, or do we keep that with really what most streets are, just one congruent thing? And my other question would be that we're talking about a paseo, but to my knowledge, the paseo ends on Swift and White Ash. So what is the future configuration? My concern is, what are we doing with that street that dead ends at White Ash and the paseo that dead ends there also on Swift and White Ash? And maybe I misunderstood what I saw too, I don't know.
Mackenzie, if I can help you answer at least one of the questions, at least pertaining to the question on the paseo that's existing there with the Woodside development. So part of our task as planners is to work with future developers to ensure that we eventually connect that existing paseo to the corner of DeWolf and Ashland Avenue. And as shown here on the exhibit, if this project was to move forward, they will be constructing a portion of that paseo along on the north side of Ashland, along the frontage. And it
But wouldn't that be considered just like a normal streetscape that we already have, or we usually plan from street to street? You know, a streetscape is going to have 3 foot of grass, walkway, 10-foot green space, block wall. Is the paseo taking the place of that?
The paseo is a standard 30-foot wide strip where you have typically 10-foot landscaping next to the curb, a 10-foot wide sidewalk or paseo, and then another 10 feet of landscape. Sean, do you know the typical, what's the streetscape there for just a standard sidewalk and landscaping on Ashland? Is it 20 feet?
I think it's 20 feet for the typical.
So a typical, okay, thank you. So a typical setback for landscaping there on Ashland would be 20 feet, and the sidewalk probably 5 feet standard width?
11, 5, and 4, so 11-foot planter, 5-foot sidewalk, 4-foot planter for 20-foot total.
Does that help you?
No, because I think we're talking apples and oranges. When I walk down that paseo that's in the McCafferty project there, it is literally a 10-foot walkway with walls on both sides, block walls, with a landscape, I'm going to guess about a 10-foot landscape on both sides. So you have wall, 10-foot landscape, wide walkway of 10 feet, landscape, another wall. That's the paseo that's there.
Mm-hmm.
Am I wrong there, Sean?
No, you got it right, Chuck. Yeah.
Okay. And I'm not trying to be problematic. I'm just wondering what the future would lie for that, because it's kind of apples and oranges.
Well, like George was explaining, the plan and the intent is to eventually connect the dots. Now, this project doesn't get it there. We need more development to the west of this in order to connect up to White Ash and Swift. And I believe we might have to go through the back of your parents' property, but that's right there, the nursery.
I was just wondering for future reference, you know, it sounds like you're considering that. That is something that you would like to expand upon as far as finishing that paseo there.
Yeah, and this project's going to do its part to put the paseo along Ashland. It's going to be a wider walk. It won't be the 5-foot, right?
Well, that answered my question.
Do we have anyone else who would like to speak for this project? Sir, if you could turn on your mic. There's a little button there to turn the mic on. Very good.
Did I get it?
Yes.
My name is William Mancebo. I live at 3331 Ashland Avenue. My property butts up against this property. And I I know we're not being able to stop this development, but we'd like to kind of make it look halfway decent. The colors on these, or you won't find those in the neighborhood. Those bright oranges and blue, deep blues. At the corner of Temperance and Ashland, is some apartments there that are kind of a gray color. They just put in a new apartment on Willow, north of Ashland, that has very subdued colors. If I've got to come out of my house and look at that thing with all those gaudy colors on it, I'm not going to like that. I think you probably dealt with the traffic, but the traffic from 7 o'clock till 8:30 is impossible to get out of your driveway unless you can catch a light. But people make a right turn on the red light, so it's just a constant traffic rotating out of there. Coming to school, the left turn lane is backed up to Locan, half a mile in the mornings. How is this going to affect is it going to create a bigger problem? You got two driveways, one off of Ashland and one off of DeWoop. And they're going to be trying to get in and out of there in the mornings. I assume they're going to be people working. And I'm concerned about outdoor lighting. Is this project going to have outdoor lighting that faces my house? Am I going to have to, at nighttime, put up with the lights shining out? It's bad enough with the school over there. But I'd like to know if they're going to have outdoor lighting that it can't be shining off of the property. And that's about all I've got.
Thank you very much for your comment. Do we have anyone else who would like to speak for this project? Okay. Do we have anyone online that would like to speak for this project?
No online comments.
Okay, very good. At this time, I'd like to invite any comments in opposition of this project. If you can please state your name and address for the record.
I'm Deanne McKeaton, and I'm at 3331 Ashland. I just have a question. Like my dad said, you guys butt up against us. What kind of fencing is there going to be between us, and how tall is it?
I'll just clarify that at the end. We will allow the applicant to come back up and comment on anything. Thank you. Press that button. It's like a person speaking.
That one. Okay, thank you. My name is David Rushop. I have lived about 5 years catty-corner to the Reagan High School. I am the fourth house down the walkway, so I am 3.5 or 4 houses south of the proposed project. I wanted to clarify something from Kelsey George. I heard you mention a couple of times that there were a few residents at that meeting at the elementary school. I remember 25 to 30 people at that meeting, okay? She said it 2 or 3 times, so I would like to correct that. There was not one single person there that I remember that was for this project. They had a lot of concerns, and I I really don't feel that very many of those have been addressed. One of the primary concerns that I have, I'm a asphalt paving contractor for about 40 years. Streets, parking lots, and everything else. It seems very dangerous to me, and I think I spoke to George, Mr. Gonzalez, about the traffic count, and I heard Kelsey mention, and I could have that correct, that it was decided, we brought up some concerns about it, and it was decided that further study wasn't needed. One of the points that was brought up at that meeting was that the traffic count was done during COVID, and the high school and junior high were closed. That traffic needs to be looked at very seriously during the hours Mr. Masivo mentioned, 7 to 8:30, because you can't turn, you can't get out, you can't get in. Part of that, the north driveway onto DeWolf just barely misses the right turn lane off of DeWolf onto Ashland. And the Ashland, that's called an acceleration zone to get them going. And they make the corner and then try to speed up and merge into the traffic. And then there's a driveway right there. That just seems like that needs some more attention. I'm glad to see that there are more stalls. That was one of our concerns. In the original thing, there weren't as many parking stalls. There are 2 parks relatively close to that. I believe the park that is back behind my property, I'm on Buckingham, 1 street south of Ashland. So I'm very close to that. I ride my bicycle there. I walk there. I take my dog over to the school. I'm very familiar, and I'm out and about, not just in a car. There's a city park back there in our subdivision. I don't believe that they considered 26 units with maybe 70 or 80 people in them when they developed that park. There's another park that's north of north and west of there, that's a little bit farther away. I don't think they planned on that. Those parks are well attended, clean and neat, and I just don't know what happens when you add this many people. The property values in our area, they're $500,000 and $600,000 houses. We bought that with the understanding that that was zoned for single-family residence and that it would not be apartments. So this is quite a shock to a number of our neighbors and myself. Future resale values and the amount of time that it takes to sell a piece of property will be changed by this, and I'm not sure that that has been factored in. I agree with the neighbor of mine on Ashland. That's a horrible-looking place. It looks like it's being built with the least amount of money that it can cost so it can have the most amount of people in there. 2 houses north of Chuck's parents, there's a new house they just built in there. Raven Enterprise built it. Evidently, that person felt like it was worth it, and he could have a driveway there. Beautiful new home. Single-family residence is what that should be and what everybody expected would be in there, and I, for one, think it should go back to that. I think anybody that drives in that area, walks in that area, and realizes the hazard to the children going to that school would give serious consideration to that. I realize the developers want to make some money. I believe there are other ways to do it. There's an access road eventually that would be built. Chuck, what is that road that goes back to you there? Wide Ash. That's for traffic. It would eventually come out at Ashland, and it still will. It misses that property, but that could be somehow developed so that those people would exit down that and get out onto the Wolf. Would be much safer than what is planned there. I think I'm just about through. Let me look and see if I'm there. I'm relatively familiar with that property, and I'm sure that the planning department is too. You have the marketplace at Leonard and Shaw. Will Dyke, there's a huge high-density development that will go in there for apartments. 3-story, I think, is what is planned. Mrs. Sereni is sitting over here with us. She has a property at DeWolf in Ashland, 37 acres. Up to half of that property will eventually be in apartments. Dr. Persons is basically DeWolf and Gettysburg. He has a very large section of his property that is zoned for apartments. You have 242 apartment units, which is Spencer developed at the southwest corner of Ashland and Leonard. That will generate 700 people. There are a lot of places for apartments that have been approved and that are going in there. that are more suited than this residential neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak in opposition of this project? Do we have anyone online?
No online comments.
Very well. At this time, I'd like to offer the applicant an opportunity for rebuttal to any of the questions raised.
Sure. Thank you so much for the rebuttal. I do want to recognize I've been giving, public presentations for a long time as city staff and as a representative to applicants, and it never gets easier. So I do know how challenging and daunting it is to come here, and this is part of the democratic process. So I do want to recognize everybody who came out tonight and even had the courage to speak, because it is very challenging. The first thing I do want to do is apologize if I said a few members. What I thought I said, or what I meant to say, was quite a few members. There were several people present at that at the neighborhood meeting that we held, and staff was present as well. In terms of addressing the kind of fencing and how tall, I might have to defer to staff on that one, but I believe the requirement is 7 feet block wall to adjacent residential. Right, correct. Yeah, so it'll be 7 feet on the west and north boundary of the project. It will be decorative wrought iron on the frontage, just because that's the requirement for the paseo. For the traffic count, before I get too far, the owners want to make it clear to everybody they don't like how they look, the renderings. They don't like the colors or the materials. They agree that it's very ugly. This project has been going for a really, really long time, and it's very expensive to do renderings and technical studies. So until there was some kind of assurances on the land use, it didn't make sense to keep paying to have the renderings done. They 100% agree that they are ugly and they don't like those colors. In terms of the traffic generation, I know that is always a contentious thing. It is adjacent to a school, which always makes traffic challenging. The LSA, again, total third-party consultant. I had nothing to do with any of the technical studies. The city didn't prepare the technical studies. It was prepared by a licensed traffic engineer who did the trip generation based on the total counts, the peak AM and the peak PM traffic generation. So peak AM runs from 7 to 9, and peak PM runs from 4 to 6 p.m., 7 to 9 a.m. and 4 to 6 p.m. I know the peak PM doesn't necessarily capture when school is released, but I think peak AM does capture when school is in session. And the numbers were generated were based on the Institute of Traffic Engineers trip generation manual. So they weren't necessarily counts that were taken during COVID or anything like that. It was an assessment that was made based on a metric that you look at based on the use, and then you multiply it by the number of units. So the proposed project would generate 11 peak hour trips and 13 peak afternoon evening trips, which is substantially lower than the 100 peak hour trips that trigger further analysis. So the further analysis is where they would go out with traffic counters and actually count cars every day. The peak hour trips and that number that it comes from, and Sean, please correct me if I'm wrong at all, is based on, among many things, is based on persons per household. And I know it's always confusing when we hear that apartments generate less traffic than single-family homes, and that's simply because, generally speaking, it's not simply, I shouldn't say it's simply, but one of the reasons is because the persons per household in an apartment unit is significantly different than the persons per household in a single-family residential home. So that's why those numbers always seem kind of shocking and counterintuitive to what you would think. Also, in multifamily development, everybody is not coming and going at the same time. And it's distributed among the two different access points, whereas when you're leaving your single-family house, you have the entire subdivision or tract kind of getting out of those two required points of ingress or egress. two parks nearby that didn't consider the additional residential that would result from the increased density. I think that's probably absolutely correct. I don't know how they would capture that number. So to address that question, I don't really know, other than this project is also required to provide open space on site for the residents in the form of private open space. So, and the city is required to provide park space based on the Quimby Act and numbers. So regionally, park space has to be available to capture the full population. So to address the question, would this population have adequate access to park space? I would argue yes, because they are required to provide open space, and the city does have regional parks that capture some overflow. Horrible looking, I did touch on that. I think we all agree on that. More locations better suited than this one for multifamily. I think that one's kind of hard to address. I have kind of an initial gut reaction to that. Just because there's suitable sites for multifamily doesn't mean we can't have additional, and the numbers are the numbers, and Clovis does need additional units. They need to add to their housing stock, and this would help them get there. And the understanding that it would be single-family residential, I think that's the last point that I have. And again, there's no real way for me to answer that. I understand that most people probably bought that with the understanding it would be a house forever, but that's generally considered an undeveloped area that will likely in the next 40, 50, 60, 70 plus years be redeveloped and look very different than what it is. Even if we were to go back to my conceptual lotting pattern, even the future planned single-family residential shows housing that would be a zone district more dense than what it's currently planned for. So it's currently planned for RA, and the conceptual lotting shows R1. So I think I captured everybody's comments. I hope I did. Oh, lighting and glare. So to answer your question, the city does have performance standards, and lighting does have to be shielded. We can't shine light on anybody else's property. It's meant to just serve the internal driveways and buildings that are on the property. This doesn't show it very well, but the original conceptual also has an internal facing courtyard, so nobody is even walking to their dwelling unit doors from the exterior. It's all on the interior side for privacy.
Very good. Thank you very much. Chair and Tuna, is it okay if I clarify one item for fencing? Typically, we do see the 7-foot wall put in. Our code does say a minimum of 6 feet and then up to 7 feet. And then anything higher, there would have to be some further analysis for anything higher than that. Thank you.
Okay, at this time, I'd like to close the public hearing and invite any further clarification from staff regarding any other item.
I just wanted to let you know if you have any traffic questions, I'm prepared to answer them.
Perfect. Okay, I'd like to bring it back to the commission for deliberation and eventually taking a vote. Does the commission have any comments for the discussion? No questions for Shawnee is completely prepared. Okay, so doesn't sound like we have any questions, so at this time we're going to go ahead and invite commissioners to a motion. Okay.
Okay. Well, I want to thank you all for coming out. I know coming out and speaking at these meetings is not generally fun. I have some concerns with the density bump, but given the location and the size of this property, I can see why they're going with multi-unit. So in light of that, I don't have a problem with the density. I don't have some of the concerns that you guys have regarding lighting and fencing. A lot of that we can't touch on. That's done later down the road in site plan review. We're really only looking at the density. And I don't, like I said, I don't see a problem with this one. Anybody else want to?
I'll comment. I think I'll speak for myself, but probably everyone up here. Making general plan amendments and adjustments to density always give me pause. I think it's fair to say that, we have a general plan. People are looking at that general plan and trying to decide, I'm planning to buy a house in a certain area and hoping that conditions around that stay the same. That being said, I think everyone knows that there's a constant level of progress that's going to happen. Sometimes we get smarter as we go. Sometimes there's things forced upon us that we have to address and react to. In this case, I see this, as an infill lot. I think the project is pretty well thought out. I appreciate the applicant's commitment of, well, maybe by right, if it's zoned, you could build more. I think we want developers to do the right thing. We want to make sure that things that are being built in Clovis integrate well with surrounding areas. Hearing the fence heights, I do like to see privacy screening with landscape. I think that's often a good accommodation, especially as folks may build around the apartments in the future. People have backyards, swimming pools and things. These are going to be two-story homes with folks looking right in. So I just would encourage the applicant to consider that and be thoughtful about how you integrate a property like this with the neighborhood. But from my perspective, I think as an infill lot and with the conditions of approval and mitigating factors that have been discussed, I'd be in favor of moving forward.
One thing, we as citizens of Clovis, we need to be very concerned on what's going on in Sacramento. A lot of pressures are being put on the city of Clovis to meet their demands, and there is no longer single-family residence in the state of California. I could take my house out next door to yours and put in 4 units. I could take and put in 2 units behind the house right now without doing anything. So things are put on us that we don't necessarily like, but unfortunately we have to deal with them. I want to thank the Planning Commission and the developer in working out a very good design that I see on this with everything that I've seen while I've been on the commission for 8 years. And it's very good. Thank you for your hard work and your ability to work with the developer and the developer willing to work with you on it. And I think it's a decent project and I'm in favor of it.
Okay, can go ahead and open for a motion for the resolution addressing environmental determination and mitigated negative deck.
I'll make a motion to approve, recommend to the City Council adopt an environmental finding of a mitigated negative declaration for General Plan Amendment 2023-002 and rezone 2023-002.
I'll second.
Okay, I have a motion by Commissioner Hatcher and second by Commissioner Bedstead to adopt a resolution recommending that the City Council adopt an environmental finding of a mitigated negative declaration for General Plan Amendment 2023-002 and rezone 2023-002. Commissioner Hatcher? Commissioner Bedstead?
Yes.
Chair Antuna?
Yes.
Commissioner Hebert?
Yes.
Commissioner Hinkle?
Yes.
The motion carries unanimously 5-0, approving the mitigated negative declaration.
I'll make a motion, a resolution to recommend the City Council approve an amendment to the general plan to redesignate the subject property from low-density residential and open space to the high-density residential.
Second.
I have a motion by Commissioner Hatcher and second by Commissioner Bedstead to adopt a resolution recommending that the City Council approve an amendment to the general plan to redesignate the subject site from low-density residential and open space designations to the high-density residential designation. Commissioner Hatcher?
Yes.
Commissioner Bedstead?
Yes.
Chair Antuna?
Yes.
Commissioner Hebert?
Yes.
Commissioner Hinkle?
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously, 5-0, approving General Plan Amendment 2023-002.
And I'll make a motion, a resolution to recommend the City Council approve a rezone of the subject property from the RA Single Family Residential Very Low Density Zone District to the R3 Multifamily High Density Zone District.
Second.
I'm sorry, was that second by Commissioner Hinkle? I have a motion by Commissioner Hatcher and second by Commissioner Hinkle to adopt a resolution recommending that the City Council approve a rezone of the subject site from the RA Single Family Residential Very Low Density Zone District to the R3 Multifamily High Density Zone District. Commissioner Hatcher?
Yes.
Commissioner Hinkle?
Yes.
Chair Antuna?
Yes.
Commissioner Bedstead?
Yes.
Commissioner Hebert?
Yes.
The motion carries unanimously, 5-0, approving rezone 2023-002.
Okay, Commission Secretary, are there any administrative items?
None tonight.
Very well. At this time then, we will be adjourning this meeting at 7:02 until the next Planning Commission meeting scheduled for February 22nd, 2024.